Today we're going to dive in and check out the new Division 2 expansion, Warlords of New York, which adds a brand new campaign set in New York City, giving us some new bad guys to hunt down, along with new exotics and gear sets, updates to skills, loadouts, recalibration, and more, a level cap raise from 30 to 40, as well as introducing seasons that bring global events, gameplay modifiers, and unique rewards. Now today's video is being sponsored by Ubisoft. They reached out and asked if I wanted to give the game a look. I played a ton of the original Division. It was one of my favorite looter shooters of the time, but I really haven't spent a lot of time with Division 2, so I'm kind of getting a fresh look at this game. So what I thought made sense for this video was just to try to take you through my gameplay experience. I finished the Warlords of New York story, I've made my way to the new level cap of 40, and I've really just started to dip my toes into the Endgame activities. So what has the experience been like? What's new in Warlords of New York, and what's it like playing the Division 2 in 2020? Let's get into it. Oh, and if you like what you see, click on that link in the video description. Helps a lot, thank you so much. So the Warlords of New York, as the name implies, and as I've already said, this does take place in New York City, not DC. And at the very start, you actually start off in the capital of DC, and there's a helicopter parked out front that's like, hey, stuff's going on in New York, you wanna come help out? And if you say yes, you're basically required to stay in the new area. The whole premise here is that there's a bunch of rogue agents, 5 to be exact, that we have to hunt down. The entire expansion is essentially a manhunt. These rogue agents that you need to find throughout the new area in New York City. So the map is divided into these 4 different regions, and each one of the sub-bosses is allocated to one of the regions. So you go into the area, searching for clues, trying to track them down, figure out where they've been and where they're hiding, and then eventually you find them and they bring you into these boss fights. Now, each one of the bosses has kind of their own unique flavor and twist in terms of like their lore and their specialties and stuff. Like there's the demolitionist, there's a guy who's like a sneaky rogue dude, there's the techie people, you know. They give each one of them a little bit of flavor, and it was kind of actually cool because the final engagements with the bosses themselves really reflected the character that they built around them. Now, one of the cool things with this expansion too is that there are 4 brand new skills, and those skills are tied up directly in each 4 of these sub-bosses. So when you pick a region and you hunt all the clues and you eventually find and kill the sub-boss, you're given access to a new skill. These skills include the clone of yourself that acts as a distraction. There's the shock trap ability, and then there are 2 different variations of the sticky bomb launchers. They were pretty cool skills, and I did try to spend some time playing with them whenever I got them, but frankly, I have a couple of skills that I just really like sticking with, which is my healing drone and the turret. I just find both of them incredibly useful for when I'm playing solo, which I do most of the time. So I'm mainly stuck with the skills that I was comfortable using, but it's nice that this expansion opens up some new skills for the people who are looking for more variety. Now, it wasn't necessarily a beeline as I go for each of these 4 sub-bosses. I don't even know if they're supposed to be called sub-bosses, but that's what I'm going with. So I wasn't exactly beelining it from one to the next, because in this whole process, there's a lot of open world activities. I mean, it is an open world Ubisoft game. This game has plenty of stuff to do. So they start off the area of New York within a fog of war, so everything's covered and you don't know what is where. So you have to go into those locations, uncover them. When you go to the safe houses, it'll show you some points of interest and stuff. Besides the main quest, there's a handful of side quests that you can pick up. And then there are just these like open world events that you'll come across. So there are things like control points where you go in and you have to take down a couple of waves of enemies and this final boss, and then you'll unlock a supply room, which will give you a bunch of supplies and gear. There are these propaganda broadcasts where they're broadcasting propaganda out to the local area, and so you try to go to hack the terminal and broadcast out your side's message.
If you're looking to switch sides, contact by radio and we can arrange a meeting.
And then you'll come across various things where you have to help civilians. They're basically these mini rescue missions. And there's also things like elite patrols, objects within the environment to find, like you'll find these SHD caches. And one of the things that I actually really enjoyed that they do in this game is a lot of the environmental storytelling that you get through the collection of these cell phones. So every time you go into a new region, anywhere that you go in the world, scattered throughout each of the streets, there'll be these cell phones to collect, and then you can hear some dialogue kind of pertaining entertaining to the people who live there, or maybe the big bad guy that you're fighting in that region. So it's kind of cool. It's a good way of building the lore of the world without stopping the action. When I play games like this, I really don't necessarily love sitting through cutscenes or tabbing through like long lines of dialogue. I really actually do personally enjoy when they can tell you the story while you're still playing the game. So yeah, I'm going around hunting those 4 sub-bosses, doing some of those open world activities, and then I kind of wrap everything up in, I think it was about 8 hours total that it took me to take down each of the 4 rogue agents and then finally get to level 40. Now, once you get to level 40, you unlock the final main mission, which has you taking down Keener. And he is essentially the mastermind, the big bad boss behind this expansion. And I'm not going to spoil any of the story for you guys, but basically, once you finally defeat him, it's one of those like, now the real threat is just beginning kind of situations, which is, it's supposed to kind of propel you to continue to play the game and go through the loot grind and eventually make your way up to doing things like raids and all of that. Now, along with this whole new location, there's a brand new base of operations. It was the capital in DC. In New York, it's this place called Haven, and this is where everything is consolidated for you. All of the crafting stuff that you want to do, your stash, and NPCs to chat with. You'll also see other people walking around these locations, as well as the safe houses that are scattered throughout each one of the zones. I was also introduced for the first time. Remember, I didn't play too much of the Division 2 at launch. I was introduced for the first time to these robo-dogs with turrets on their back. Absolutely horrifying, may I say. I was not expecting that. A terrifying peek into the future of warfare that I hope to never encounter in my lifetime. Something else that I really noticed throughout the course of playing this game is that gear seems to matter quite significantly. Specifically, there was a gear revamp, Gear 2.0. Talk about that a little more in a second. But basically, what I noticed was that I went from a mix of gear with each one of the different attributes like weapon damage, tech, and defense, essentially. And then I swapped to a full weapon damage build, and I noticed while I was significantly squishier, I was also killing things a lot faster. And since we're on that topic, I know with a lot of the Division games, there's this general concern about the bullet sponginess of enemies, especially human enemies. It doesn't feel too bad in this game. I've heard that over time, it's gotten better and better. And again, especially as you kind of tailor make your build and try to get the right gear, bullet sponginess doesn't become as much of an issue. Although obviously, when you move into the higher difficulty, the more challenging stuff, you're not going to be one-shotting everything, because then there's simply no challenge at all. So there is still enemy health to work towards, and I think they do a good job in this game of at least trying to justify that with these heavily armored enemies that are literally wearing like a tank's worth of armor and metal on their body, and you have to slowly dwindle that stuff down before they're exposed, and then you can kill them in just a couple of shots. So I think that helps alleviate some of the, what is the word, ludonarrative dissonance. Is that right? Do I know English? I was close. Ludonarrative dissonance. But it's this whole idea where it's one thing if I'm shooting this giant alien space monster. It's another thing if I'm shooting at a human, that it takes a long time to take one of those down, but humans people don't like it, basically. So I think they do a decent job with the whole implementation of the armor system. And there's also the implementation of them just people being doped up, essentially, like huffing chemicals and then going into battle. And it's like, oh, they take a lot. It's almost like they got extra armor. And that kind of actually checks out. I don't know if you've heard stories before of people just super high on it. You know what? This video is going to get demonetized. I don't even know if I could talk about this, but basically, yes, they have justifications for why enemies don't get dropped in one shot. Given that it's a RPG loot game, it's kind of a necessary evil of this genre, because it isn't just like a hyper competitive FPS where you can just one tap everything, because it just doesn't make sense in a game with numbers and loot with values and rarities and boss enemies, and like you can't just one shot everything. But anyways, I digress. So I want to briefly touch on the new stuff that came with the Warlords of New York expansion. There's the new playable area of New York City, which I personally kind of enjoyed going back to that setting. It's not the exact same location as the first game, but it's the same it's still New York City. So you get a lot of the same feeling through going through the streets and stuff. And it was cool to see some new areas and new parts of New York along with that. And then you've got the bosses that that you hunt down, the 4 sub-bosses and the big boss of Keener. And then there's new systems and stuff. So Gear 2.0, which was added to both the expansion as well as the base game. It was a revamp of the gear system. And the basic way to say this is that they kind of streamlined and simplified the gear to make it very easy to figure out if something is an upgrade. So no more constantly checking back and forth between each one of the number values of multiple pieces of gear. They basically tell you up front, this one is better than that one. And along with the Gear 2.0 revamp, again, new gear sets and exotics have been added to the game. The new skills, of course, that I mentioned, the 4 brand new skills that you get from taking on those 4 sub-boss rogue agents. Evidently, there's been changes to the Dark Zone. I haven't stepped into it yet, but basically they're saying there's more of a PvP focus. This is for the people who really want some competitive action, basically. And I've also been told there are incredibly good rewards in the Dark Zone now, like some of the best rolls you can get in the game will actually be coming from PvP. They've added these modifiers known as directives, which will present additional challenges, basically modifications to the enemies. Those can be applied for specific missions or just globally for the entire play session, and that will reward you with bonus experience. Additionally, there are difficulty world tiers that you can bump up for bonus experience, better loot, and slight changes to the enemy AI, and that goes all the way up to legendary, which will offer the best chance for god rolls. There are the shade levels. Now, this is actually pretty cool for people who like to one game something. Like if I'm just playing Division 2, this is the long-term progression. Post max level progression system to increase things like your damage or your defense capabilities. And actually reminds me a lot of the Diablo 3 Paragon system that you're gonna want to just keep playing to get these incremental bonuses. And then finally, a new raid is gonna be coming later. I don't believe it's in the game at the moment. There's gonna be 2 variations, a level 30 and a level 40 version. So it's kind of cool. Some of this stuff will still apply to people who just have the base game and didn't buy the expansion. So it's not like everyone who doesn't pick up Warlords of New York is getting completely left in the dust. Although typically, if you're playing this game constantly, you're probably someone who's picking up the expansion anyways, right? So now what about the end game? Again, I haven't spent much time with it. Played in total, I think about 15 hours over the past few days, and I've gotten to the point where I'm starting the end game gear grind. As far as I know, it's all about searching for better rolls on your gear, like the better random distribution of stats and stuff, and then grinding for materials for crafting. Now, besides the raids, there are things like you can run around doing different world activities like bounties, which are these high value targets you have to hunt down on a timer. But again, really, I'm just getting started with the end game. I haven't dove into it too much, and basically I'm thinking if I continue to play Division 2 over these next few weeks, I'll probably just do another video on it separately from this. Again, I absolutely don't know everything about this game. I am not a Division 2 expert, and even though I know it's a sponsor video and people are very wary of opinions, I have enjoyed, I'll just say it, I have enjoyed coming back and checking out the game again. I'm always in this position where there are so many new games and things that I want to check out. I don't always get to the games that I'm interested in the first place. So I'm happy, frankly, to have gotten this opportunity to sit down and put some fairly decent amount of time over these past few days into checking out the Division 2. It seems pretty cool. It seems like, from what I'm kind of feeling from the community, that with some of these revamps like Gear 2.0 and changes to the Dark Zone, they're doing some things that the community hopefully will be happy with and are interested in. And yeah, there you go. That was my time with the Division 2 Warlords of New York. Hopefully this video was interesting for you guys. Thanks to Ubisoft for sponsoring. I'm hitting my keyboard. I'm ruining my video. Thank you guys for watching. Again, if you like the video or you just want to help me out, click on that link below. Really appreciate you. Thanks so much. I'll see you guys in the next video, all right? Take it easy.